Howdy, all of you delicious people out there. I am here today to review On the Line, a Mel Gibson film. For those of you out there, this movie is available on Premium Access for $6.99, but I'm going to go on and give you an app that you can dare in fact see this movie for absolutely free. And so with that said, if you want to just give me a couple of minutes to talk about this film, I will go on and then tell you where to see this movie for free. So with that said, let's go on and just drop the mic and the weird goofy headphones and this bizarre voice that sounds very disc jockey like. So with that said, how did I feel about On the Line? Well, in all honesty, this movie is a lot of just running around, and bizarrely enough, I found this movie to be predictable. Because, in all honesty, this movie goes into a lot of like starting and stopping to where there's obviously having so many false finishes for this film. And you're just like, well, like, this movie can't end here because obviously we're like halfway through the film or we're X number of minutes into the film, and so this movie needs to continue to go somewhere. What are they gonna have, like 40 minutes of credits? That would not make any sense whatsoever. So this movie is basically designed to F with you throughout the whole entire film until it gives you an ending that you may not go on and be satisfied about. And here's the thing also. I was to actually like predict the ending, bizarrely enough. I was like, you know what, I've always ever kind of wanted a movie to just end this way, and because I feel like this movie is giving me that. And so how about we play this way of this movie ending, and then come to find out, boom. And I was like, really? Like that's what you do, movie? That's what you're doing? All right. Um so I would go on to say that this movie is so squeakingly like okay, like it really is to be a tight okay. Because man, do I really just want to go the other direction and just say that this movie was bad. So what is this movie about? So we go on to have Mel Gibson's character who is playing Elvis. Elvis. Did they really just want to just throw out names because it doesn't really matter? So Mel is playing Elvis, and Elvis is to be this late night DJ or talk personality on the radio. And so we have Elvis, who it seems is to be getting one phone call that he doesn't have all the answers to. Because this guy is to be a person who wants people to call in so that way he can help him in some way, or her. Trying to, like, therapeutically try to talk them through their problems and hopefully resolve or have like a flip of the coin uh, thing kind of working out here for any number of these people that call Elvis on this radio station. So we have Elvis that is to go on and get the one phone call that, of course, is Gary. Gary is to be desperately wanting to go on to get into this home to find these people to then put a gun to their heads. So Elvis, of course, is coming up with anything that he possibly can to have Gary not go into this. It's like, well, hey, like, you're in a lose-lose situation, Gary. Like, come on. So, come to find out, the place of which that Gary is to break into is to, of course, be none other than Elvis's home himself. So, Elvis is to hear the sounds of his wife and his child, and so now Elvis is to need to go on and do whatever Gary is to say so he can keep his family alive. Even though Elvis is going to have to say things that might tear his family apart afterwards. So, come to find out, the further and further we go into this movie, Gary is to go on and bring up a girl named Lauren, who is to be one of the workers that Elvis used to work with. And so, come to find out, Lauren, because of some kind of back and forth, kind of joking amongst coworkers that had gone on and possibly went too far, Lauren had given her own life to a self-murder, and now Gary is pushing Elvis to do the exact same thing to protect his own family. To have Elvis, who is to go on to try to do the right thing here, but so, when Elvis tries to go on and do the right thing, there is to still always be these chess moves in place, to where Gary is to go on and be like, well, I'm not going to get outsmarted. Like, I'm not going to go on and have people just go on and tell me, like, oh yeah, like, this happened. Oh yeah, we did it. Uh-huh, sure. And then Gary's like, oh, well, did you? Because I don't think you did. So, since Elvis is going on and playing a game with Gary, Gary decides that he is going to do the same. A game where the whole entire building is rigged to blow. And so now, Gary is to, of course, go on and have Elvis play a little hide and seek. And so this all leads to a lot of just running around, and a lot of Elvis and a lot of a guy named Dylan who are desperately trying to find Gary within this building. And by the time that they go on to find Gary, they find people dead. So, by the time that this all leads to Elvis seeing face to face with Gary, we then have this all be a matter of minutes till this story ends. And so, with that said, I feel like if I go on and I state the comparison of this movie, it might give the movie away. But, as I like to go on and give a little bit of a clue here for maybe someone who is to also have gone on and seen a lot of movies in their life, I would state that this movie does feel like a Cry Wolf, where we have Elvis who is thinking, okay, this is where the story ends, this is where the story ends, and then it just continues, it continues. And so it's like, okay, but there is also another reason why I'm stating the words Cry Wolf. And so with that said, like, yeah, this movie to me, like, if I didn't state this already, this movie was pretty predictable. Like, I even predicted the ending, and there, of course, is to be like two endings to this film, and like the first ending, I was like, okay, like this is obviously just this now, and then the second ending, I was like, okay, like really, I was like, really, okay, all right. So with that said, barely okay, but at the end of the day, I probably would recommend people seeing it because at least it has an interesting ending. Compared to all the like cardboardy traditional movies. So, with that said, I think it's about that time for you to go on and have me just double five this bad boy up. Where can you go on and see this movie? So, first thing I would recommend is an app called Doxy, Doxcy. You can there, in fact, watch on the line for absolutely free. If you have a Google Play Store account, you can go on and go through the Google Play Store and be able to watch on the line for free. You can also go on to an app called Play UHD, and on the line should be on there soon, and should be on there for absolutely free. It's just, I think it's technically on there, but I don't think there's an actual like server that has the movie yet because it's early. So at some point it will have the movie. So with that said, there's also to be other apps called 123 Movies. 123 Movies, I think the logo has the word hub in it. That's probably to understand which one is to be the one that actually works. Because some 123 movie apps, like the servers don't work, or there are certain times when content can't be accessed. So, and then the last app, of course, would be some version of Yes Movies, because Yes Movies, you can go through a Google search and find that also. If you need to find a Yes Movies, that does work. But anyways, so now I think it's about that time to just double five this bad boy up. Because it's about that time, yet again, to of course go into spoiler time. Spoiler time is about that time to get spoil this movie. So, in the beginning of this film, we, of course, have a person in a chair and this red substance dropping upon the ground. And there is to be a man who is begging for his life. And so, the further and further we start to pan back, we realize that Mel Gibson is in this chair talking to his daughter that is sitting in his lap. And Elvis, who is played by Mel Gibson here, is telling his daughter that she had spilled this prune juice and that he is guilty because he's putting on some weird unusual play with these two dolls. So all of a sudden Elvis's wife comes in and is telling Elvis like, okay, it's time for bed. So Elvis is to take his daughter into bed and then is to get his coat because Elvis needs to go on and go to the radio station to do his late night gig. So Elvis goes on to ask his wife, it's like, well, hey, like, do you want to know what's going on in the radio station tonight, hon? And Elvis's wife is just to say, it's like, well, no, like, because I know I'll hear all about it tomorrow. And so Elvis is like, oh, okay, all right. So Elvis leaves, and so he makes it to the radio station, and Elvis is going on to talk to this security guard. When all of a sudden, we have this unusual man who is coming into the station, and Elvis is like, well, hey, whoa, whoa, like, who is this guy? And so this guy is to go on and tell Elvis, like, well, you know who I am. And Elvis is like, no, I don't know who you are. And so this guy gets more like strange and very weird to the point of this guy kind of like taking off his shirt. And so Elvis is like, well, like, tell me who you are, son. And so this kid ends up stating that he is the Messiah. He is basically Jesus. And so Elvis is like, oh my God, yeah, like, you are. And so this character is going on, this madman is threatening to uh to die, or is threatening that he needs to go on and get his message out. And so Elvis is going on and stating like, well, yeah, like, you need to go on and get your message out. So how about you go on and, like, you need an outlet. You need somewhere where you can go on and tell everyone that you are the Messiah, and because I believe you. And so the Messiah is like, oh my God, yeah, like, you're perfectly right. Like, there is to be a friend of mine that has this live stream camera, and I'm going to go on and go and get that. And Elvis is like, great. And so the guy leaves, and then Elvis is like, who was that loon? It's like, man, like, that guy should have never gotten in here, because, yeah, like, I guess they deal with crazies all day long. So Elvis then goes up to start talk to some of his people. We, of course, have Mary, who is bringing in a new employee called Dylan, who is kind of working at the soundboard. Well, of course, Mary is dealing with the calls. So Elvis is to talk to Dylan, and it seems that that this guy is kind of very fresh uh, to working on the radio, and so it's like, all right, like, okay. So Elvis continues on to meet up with the DJ that usually comes on earlier. He gets like the prime spot, and so Elvis is talking to Justin about like, well, hey man, like, how are those hemorrhoids treating you? And Justin's saying it's like, well, the only pain in the butt that I have is you. So ha 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 ha. So we have Elvis also realize that the owner of this radio station is to also be here. And Elvis is like, wait a minute, like, why are you here? Like, rarely ever have I gone on and really seen you, like, be here to go on and pay attention to anything that's going on in this radio station. And so we, of course, have Sam, who pulls Elvis aside and is to go on and tell him, it's like, well, hey, like, your numbers are really slipping. And Elvis is just like, why? And so we, of course, have the owner that states because Elvis is not active enough on his social medias, and that's obviously why he, of course, doesn't have as well as numbers as anyone else. It's like, this guy, like, works at odd hours that no one gives a rip about, but it's all going to come down to his social media that's going to save the day. So it's like, this conversation feels like a massive waste. But we have Elvis that goes on to state, it's like, well, like, I'm a DJ, not a TikTok disc jocker. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't know what you want me to do. Because Sam was going to mention to Elvis that he only had, like, sent a tweet out about his boots at one point, and this and that. So Elvis is just like, oh my God, like, you people are so, like, 2022. So, or whatever current year it is. It's like, you are so those people. So Elvis goes on to go into the booth and so they start to get things rolling, and so Mary sits next to Elvis, and so we have Elvis that is to kind of begin his night and be the traditional DJ that is like, we're here tonight for the sound, or something like that. Some goofy thing like that. It's like, so we have Elvis that is to kind of reintroduce everybody for first time listeners, having Elvis going on and introducing Mary, and then is to also tell everybody that there is to be a new like sound guy who of course is Dylan. And Elvis doesn't remember Dylan's name, and so he's like, okay, like, can you tell me what it is again, kid? And Dylan, of course, is like, okay, my name is Dylan. And Elvis like, oh, okay, all right. So we have Elvis that is to talk to Dylan and ask him, it's like, well, hey, like, how do you feel about like just being here? And Dylan's like, well, like, that's great because like you've been doing this for a long time and I've kind of always wanted to be part of this. And Elvis is like, well, wait a minute, you said that like this has been on for a long time, like, what are you calling me, like an old has-been, an old hack? And like Dylan's like, whoa, like that's not what I meant at all. And Elvis is to escalate this even further and just be like, yeah, like you new guys this and that. And so Elvis goes on and he's like, Dylan, like you're fired, like I'm done with you. And Dylan starts walking off, and then Elvis is to tell Dylan, it's like, hey man, no, like come back, like just come back, like this is all a rib, like you're the new guy, like we have to bust your chops. So Dylan's like, okay, am I fired? It's like Elvis is like, no, like get back in the booth, like come on, it was all a joke. So Dylan's like, okay, well I'm just gonna continue to do my job and get paid. Excuse me, this is such a weird movie. So we have Elvis that is going on and telling Mary, it's like, okay, let's take some calls. So, really, I'm not going to remember any of the names of these random people, like Emma or whoever the heck else was to be in this film, going on and having their weird things that they have to go on and tell Elvis about. One person was to go on and come on there to get some advice from Elvis. And so, like, one of them was about them cheating, where it seems that this woman was to be talking to her husband about possibly cheating because he may have gone on and had like some suspicions about either one of them cheating. And so come to find out, the wife was actually cheating. So like it was a whole thing about like cheating, and so like Elvis was to kind of go on and therapize this girl. So Elvis continues on to listen to these people, and one girl is to mention how she had like some dream about this worker, and that she went to that person and finally like told this guy about it. And because I'm sure that guy is having the exact same dream that she is, and come to find out the guy wasn't. And so Elvis is like, well, hey, like, but it got you to talk to this guy now, right? Didn't it? It's like, well, yeah, like that was the whole point of it. So, yeah, so Elvis goes on and talks to all these people that have all these goofy problems that he tries to therapeutically figure out a way to solve all of them, as if he is to possibly be a therapist himself, it seems. I don't know. There's no real documentation that says so. So we finally get to the more interesting call. So Elvis is to get a guy named Gary. So Gary gets on the line, and Gary starts breathing heavily. And Elvis is like, wow, guys, we have a breather here. So we have Gary that hangs up the phone, and they're like, okay, well, I guess we'll get Gary back somehow. So finally, Gary does come back. And so when Elvis is hearing Gary out, Mary is stating that it's like, well, maybe he's going to like off himself. So Elvis is like, okay, like we can really like do something with this, like talk to this person, really help them out. So Elvis is talking to Gary, and it seems that this guy's be in a garden somewhere. So Elvis is like, okay, like you're in a garden, like what are you doing out there? And he's like, oh, well, it's not my garden. It's like, okay. So Elvis is asking Gary, it's like, why are you like in someone else's garden? Like, what are you planning to do? And Gary says like he wants to ruin someone else's life. And Elvis is like, well, why, Gary? So Gary used to say that another person, maybe it's Elvis, uh, he doesn't state that yet, um, that since this guy had ruined his life, he thought he would get even. So Elvis is just like, well, you're in a lose-lose situation here, uh, Gary. Like, come on, like, don't do this. So Gary breaks into the home, and he then grabs the people that are within the house, and come to find out, Gary then mentions Elvis is like, well, hey, like, I know where you live, like, I'm in your house, and also, like, if you were to think that, like, those dogs were going to stop me, I gave your dogs rat poison, and then I killed them. So Elvis is just like, okay. So Elvis is hearing the voices of his daughter and his wife. And so now Elvis is just like, oh my God, like this is really happening. And it's like, hey, like call the police, like come on. And like, so Elvis now is trying to figure out what he can tell Gary to stop all of this. So we, of course, have Gary that tells Elvis that he needs to admit to something. And Elvis is like, okay, like whatever you need me to say. So Elvis is go on and say that he, of course, is sleeping with Mary. And Elvis is like, no, like I can't do that. And so Gary goes on and fires a couple of rounds. And Elvis is like, oh my God, is my family dead? And Gary used to go on and just be like, no, like I shot a bunch of holes in the wall. Like your family is still fine. And so we have Elvis who is to go on and be like, well, like okay, fine. Like I slept with Mary. Like, are you happy? And Gary's like, no. And so now Gary is telling Elvis, it's like, well, you remember Lauren, right? And Elvis is like, no, I don't remember Lauren. And then boom, boom, another bit of shots. And so Gary used to say, like, yeah, like, I was gonna go on and kill somebody tonight, and I killed somebody that was on a poster. And so I'm like, what the really? Okay, let's go with this. So we have Carrie that is to help Elvis understand who Lauren is as Elvis is looking through his phone at a number of different Laurens that he's probably banged in his time, and through his phone he's like, I don't know any Lauren that would probably like be the one he's talking about. And so Mary is looking at Elvis and saying like, maybe it's Lizzie. So Elvis is like, oh my God, Mary's right. So Elvis goes on to state to Gary that there was one employee that they had working there that her nickname was, I think, Lizzie, but her real name is Lauren. And so Elvis is just like, well, okay, like, is that the girl that you're talking about? And Gary's like, well, yes, it is. Like, good for you to realize that. So Gary then goes on to state that Lauren no longer works for this company anymore because she quit, and she even further went on to uh, kind of give up her life, but there's a whole lead up to that. So Elvis is to now have to be forced by Gary to go to this rooftop, and is to need to bring this microphone and these earpieces so they can continue this conversation with Gary. So Elvis is pushed to the rooftop, and so now Gary's to have this story that Lauren used to be at the top of this roof all the time having these cigarettes breaks. And so Lauren had at one point to go on to give up her life and do herself in because, of course, something that Elvis had said. And so now that Lauren had gone on to do that, Gary wants Elvis to do the same. So Gary forces Elvis to be on the ledge of this roof and jump off, or his family is going to be in jeopardy. So Elvis goes on to talk to his wife and his kid and is to tell them that he's sorry. And so we have Dylan looking on as the ledge that Elvis was to be on is empty. Having Dylan confirm to Gary that Elvis is now dead, that he had taken his own life, like Gary wanted. So come to find out, Elvis is to just be like, well, like, is there any way that you can, like, tell me or show me that Elvis had died? Is there any proof? Because, of course, we had Gary, who was to go on and fly a drone all around the building and proof right then and there that that of course Elvis is not dead. So we also had the moment in the early part of this movie where there was to be another false ending where Elvis is being told by Mary that the police are going to try to break in to Elvis's place to try and rescue his family. And so Elvis is like, well, oh my god, like, this may turn out bad, that Gary might kill my family because these police are trying to come in and get to him. So the police break into the place, and there are shots being fired. And so Elvis is thinking that both Gary and his family are dead, but then we have Gary, who is to state that he, of course, is not in Elvis's home, that he had left that home, and he has now gone on to Elvis's second home, which is the radio station. So Elvis, after realizing that that he, of course, is to now like want to walk off to get out of this building to now like try and figure out where his family is, he realizes that he can't because Elvis is wanting to leave and like try and find his family somewhere. So Dylan and Elvis are to be on the bottom floor, and come to find out, we have the security guard who had been killed by Gary. And so I guess the security guard was not friendly, and Gary had left a sign stating that. So now Elvis to realize that Gary is in the building because he didn't leave the building because that's Elvis. So Elvis has left the building. It's a joke. Anyways, so it's a whole weird, goofy thing here. But so Elvis is still in the building because he forcibly has to. Because Elvis has not been checking his social medias lately. And there is a bunch of bombs all over this building that are wired to explode. I guess nobody in this building had gone on to realize that because this, of course, is late at night. And so Gary had gone on to plan this to a perfect T. So Elvis is to be forced by Gary to play this game. If Elvis can go on within the next 40 minutes and find Gary and play this kind of ultimate hide and seek game, then Elvis will hopefully get his family free, and then they'll go on to play this game further, where Gary will probably at the end of all this still get to Elvis, but like that's the whole chase, that's the whole game. It's like the whole thing of it is that like who is Gary going to take with Elvis, or is to take with him, as Gary will probably kill himself after Elvis dies. So there's a whole thing about that of like who's gonna die at the end of all this. So here's where we get a lot of the runaround in this film. So Elvis and Dylan are starting to run through the building, and Elvis had gone on his late night talk and talked about how somebody in the building is starting to take certain computers. And Elvis is like, what is this world coming to when you go to work and like you're missing like equipment that is like vital to you doing your job? So Elvis is to go on and talk to a guy named Garcia, who is to be this janitor. And we have Elvis that realizes that this janitor is being here awful late. And so Garcia had mentioned that he, of course, was to be here because he had seen the guard dead, and so Garcia had kind of run and hid. And that Garcia had jumped out and started attacking Dylan because Garcia didn't know this guy because Dylan was new. So Elvis is like, no, like this guy's with me. But here's the thing: the more and more Garcia talks, it seems that Garcia did get a good look at the guy that was coming through with Elvis's wife and kid. So it's like, okay, so like, did you see the guy or did you not see the guy? I'm so confused. But so Elvis is to go on and ask Garcia, it's like, well, why are you here so late? And then we start to see that there are bags with computer pieces in them. So Elvis is like, "Oh, you were the guy that stole these computer pieces. Like you're the thief." And so Elvis is still mic'd up here as well as Dylan is. And so Gary is now like stating it's like, well, why is this guy here? And then once they find out why that he's here, that he's stealing stuff, Gary is to go on and tell Elvis like, well, hey, kill this guy off, like he's a thief, and like he deserves to be punished. So Elvis is like, no, 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 no. Like I'm not gonna do anything to this guy. Like he desperately needed money, and so Gary's like, well, no, like you should do something. You should kill him because I don't want him to be a part of your team. And so you gotta off him. And Elvis is like, no, like he's just gonna go back into another room, and he'll go with like Mary and the other guy who is kind of working alongside Mary, who is Steven. So we have all of this running around. So Elvis and Dylan are to get a clue that they need to go into this room where there is a bunch of toys around, because that's where Elvis's daughter supposedly will be. So Elvis goes into this room and comes to find uh, his daughter's doll in this little wardrobe thing. So we find out that Gary is in this camera room. So they're like, okay, like let's go to the camera room because that's obviously where he is, and there's only a certain number of places that have these cameras in there. So let's go to this room. So both Elvis and Dylan, like Elvis is trying to mute his mic so he can tell Dylan stuff, so like Gary won't know. And Gary's getting a little frustrated because it's like, well, hey, like I want to know what you're saying, Elvis, and also like you have all these people, your audience, they want to hear what's going on, and like they aren't hearing what's going on. So Elvis then goes to further and further find this camera room, and come to find out once they do, they kind of pull this chair around, and this is actually not Gary whatsoever. This, of course, is to be Justin. And so now another chess move. We have Gary who states, it's like, well, hey, like, I have this whole entire camera feed on a tablet or on a laptop or whatever. Like, it's like some, like, iPad or something. So Gary's estate is like, aha, like, you thought I was in this room, but I wasn't whatsoever. And so Justin, who is now to be dead, uh, is to be dead because he was a bad host. So, and it says that upon his chest. So, we further and further just have these guys who are just like, man, we're just going on this runaround. We're never going to find this guy. Like, the 40 minutes are going to be up and this building's going to explode. We're all going to die. So, we even get to a point where both Elvis and Dylan go back down to the floor level by the doors, and we have a cop who is to notice this dead body lying there, and so this cop ends up telling both Elvis and both Dylan, it's like, well, hey, like put your weapons down, and so Elvis and Dylan are just like, oh my god, like what's going on? Like this is crazy. And so Elvis is like, well, hey, we don't have enough time. Somebody's after my wife. And so the cop ends up getting a call to stay away from the building, and so he drives off. So Elvis and Dylan continue to run to where they need to go. So Dylan and Elvis are to think that there's probably only one room that would make the most sense for Gary to be in, and that would be the most unlikely room for him to be in. And so that, of course, would have to be the room that Elvis and Dylan just left. So by the time Elvis and Dylan get back to that room, we have Garcia, who is to be hung as a thief, and we have both Stephen and Mary who are tied up. Mary has the word slut over her sign on her chest, and Stephen ends up having the sign that says useless on it. So we have Elvis and Dylan that are to finally go on to get back to this room. And so Gary is on the mic talking, and come to find out, Elvis's wife and daughter are not even there. Gary had gone on to put Elvis's wife and daughter in some location and put bombs strapped to their chest. So Elvis is to talk to Gary, and while they're talking, we have Elvis that is wanting to trade places with his family. And so Gary is like, oh, so like you guys want to go on and like die for these people. It's like, so Gary starts looking at Dylan, and Dylan's like, well, hey, would you go on and would you die for these people? And Dylan's just kind of stone faced, like, and Gary's like, yeah, I think you would. I think you would die for these people. But so, speaking of which, that was a bizarre transition. There was also a moment in this movie. I don't know why I said speaking of which, but there was also a scene in this movie where Elvis and Dylan were needing to climb up this ladder from this elevator shaft to get to Gary, because they were going into a way that was kind of less conspicuous than going up the stairs, so they went through this elevator shaft. It's like, why not just take the elevator? We also had Mary that needed to go on and send Elvis this mic and this earpiece, and Mary is telling Elvis like, well, hey, if you're still in the building, there's a mic in the elevator, and Elvis just barely makes it in time to tell Gary that he's still in the building and that he has a mic now, because Gary was going to let everything just explode and kill everybody off, unless Mike talked, or unless Elvis talked. I don't know why I said Mike there. My bad. So, just getting a little bit right now. So, we have Elvis, we have Dylan making and so we're back to having Gary now in the room with these characters, and it's like, okay, Dylan, are you willing to die for these people? So we have this SWAT guy who bizarrely just comes out of nowhere, because he really does, and was to have had these vests that were rigged to explode. And so the SWAT guy ends up just miraculously coming into this radio station now from out of nowhere, and is to say, it's like, well, hey, I have these explosive vests, so like, let me go on and let me just kind of put these vests on these other people. So Dylan ends up putting on one of these vests, because he is to draw the short straw, because Elvis is to pick who was to wear the vest out of a hat, and Elvis grabs the first thing and he's like, well, like, it says it's going to be me who's going to be wearing this vest. And Gary's like, well, really, Elvis? Because every single name in the hat all says Dylan. So Dylan ends up putting on the vest, and they end up arming the vest. And so we just get to a point where Gary's like, you know what? Like, I'm just so like tired of wasting everybody's time. We go on and we have bizarrely Gary and Elvis talking throughout this entire movie about how like this is such a B movie and who would go on and play them in the film, like Joaquin Phoenix or anybody who would seem like the Joker, because Gary is a bit of a Joker. And he's kind of laughing like the Joker did in the Joker movie because he has a condition. So we have Gary that wants to end all of this, and so he ends up letting the button thing go, and he drops it onto the ground, and we're thinking, oh my god, like everyone's gonna die. And in the back of my mind, what was I thinking of how this movie was going to end? So I was like, you know what, like the whole SWAT guy being there seemed really bizarre. I was like, how is it that all of a sudden this guy just poof is there already? And how is it that nobody has really gone on and just quickly figured out that they should just kill one another? Why isn't Gary being face to face with Elvis now wanting to just shoot him and have this all be over? So I was like, you know what? Like, I would actually just want this movie to end this way, where, come to find out, this thing was to all just be a fake ruse like thing, was to be a hoax. Because in my brain, I was thinking, I'm like, you know what? It would be cool if this would just be a joke. Because hearing what Elvis's boss stated to him, it's like, well, hey, like, you guys are really having problems getting numbers and like getting people to care, and so maybe Elvis had some bizarre plan put together. And so all of a sudden, once this bomb fell, supposedly, everybody just starts to go on and starts hugging and grabbing everybody, and everybody has a really good laugh. And Dylan's looking on like, what the heck is going on here? Elvis is go on and finally grab the mic, tell everybody, hey everybody, yeah, like we had gone on to pull the biggest prank that everyone has ever seen. And like, so he starts to bring everybody in, and he's like, yeah, everybody go on and take a bow. And I'm like, oh my god, this is just like Spider-Man Far From Home, where Jake Gyllenhaal is to not really be this Peter Quill guy, and he really is to just be like the guy that invented barf. And so Elvis then is to go on and tell like the guys, like, okay, bring this guy in who's the voice of this, bring the person in who is this, bring in that. So Elvis goes on to state that he had pulled this whole thing off to have this be a joke on Dylan's expense. And so Dylan is to look on and he's just traumatized and he's like, oh my god. So Elvis is to go on and say to Dylan, it's like, well, hey buddy, like, how do you feel about this? Like, give us some kind words. Like, just tell us anything. So Dylan is to drop this bomb vest, and is to walk away, and they're like, "Oh man, come on, like it was a joke." And so, like, tell me you're gonna be at work the next day, come on. So Dylan goes on to get his coat and puts it on, and they continue to follow him to like, "Hey man, like come on, like it was all a joke, like come on man, so like get some tough skin, come on." So Dylan goes on to open this door, and he starts to walk backwards, and he falls down the flight of stairs. He bashes his head on some goofy thing, and Mary is to go on and find out that Dylan is now dead. So Mary's like, "Yeah, he's dead. Like, look, blood." So Elvis is like, "Oh my god, like, this is a horrible prank that went wrong. Wow." So we go on to now have Elvis, who is finding out that he's in deep crap, and so Elvis is to lose his job, and also this just so happens to be all coming down on him all on his birthday. So Elvis is walking out this radio station, realizing he's never going to work again, and so Elvis's boss is telling Elvis, like, "How could you have gone on and had all of this happen?" and so on and so forth, like really giving him the work. And so Elvis just tells, like, his boss is like, "Well, like, you know what, like I'm never working again, like I'm done." And so Elvis just goes into his boss's car as they're driving away, and come to find out, the person who, of course, is driving the car is none other than Dylan himself. And it's like, "Ha ha ha ha, like, happy birthday, and we got you." And Elvis is like, "Oh, like, you guys." And so all of a sudden, we have everybody who had done the prank before is all walking back over, and they're like, "Hey, like, we got you. We got you too. We got you twice. Happy birthday." So now all of a sudden we have Elvis who's just like, like, "Yeah, you got me, but man, am I gonna get you back even worse." So bizarrely, that's just how the movie ends after that, with the, like, so many false finishes and so many goofy things, and that's how the movie just ends. And I was like, okay, that was so bizarre. So with that said, that's probably just as bizarre as the way of which that I was to talk about this movie and go into spoilers about it. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about On the Line, how you thought that this was a goofy film, or if you liked it, if you hated it, if you thought that it was the worst thing that you saw this year. I could understand. But man, at least I watched it for free, so that's all that really matters. So, um, it was probably like a good waste of time movie. So there's that for you. So with that said, I'm just gonna go on and get out of here. Let me know in the comments below anything that you'd like, because I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody. I had false finish myself. Because how was this movie similar to the film Cry Wolf? Cry Wolf, of course, was a slasher movie where the killer would go on and kill a number of this guy's friends. And so, in the end of it all, we would find that none of those people had really died, that the slasher was to just be other people who had supposedly already died or had been killed. And so the whole entire movie was to just be this massive goose chase, just like On the Line was. So that's like my comparison of why Cry Wolf is to be similar to On the Line, because really, like, On the Line is to be kind of somewhat a slasher kind of film that ends up being this just kind of joke at the end of it all. So with that said, I'm going to go on and get out of here. So let me know in the comments below how you felt about On the Line. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.